Welcome to In Conversation with writer and editor Sheila Bender, discussions on writing and the writing life, a monthly chat with writers, publishers, and those who support the literary arts. Today, Sheila Bender is talking with Olympic Peninsula author Christi Killien, now Christi Glover, about her writing career in young adult fiction, personal essay, and now a blog called Farmlet, living simply and cheaply on our teeny tiny farm in western Washington.
Hello, this is Sheila Bender in the studios at KPTZ. It's my pleasure today to be interviewing Christi Killien, who lives in Olalla, Washington now, and has been an author for a very long time. Some of her young adult and children's books are still available. All of the Above is one, Artie's Brief, and The Daffodils. She maintains a website in which you can link to her free novella, A Bear's Tale, to another book, which we'll talk about later, The Fava, the Sun, and the Holy Goat, A Year on Our Farmlet, as well as read some of her essays. She's also my co-author on a writing book called Writing in a Convertible with the Top Down. Good morning, Christi.
Hi, Sheila.
It's nice to be talking to you this morning, and I'm looking forward to the report from your farmlet.
Well, thank you very much. I just am thrilled to be talking to you like this. This is wonderful.
I want to first fill our listeners in on the fact that The Fava, the Sun, and the Holy Goat, A Year on Our Farmlet, is a compilation of blog entries that you made over a year's time about your life in Olalla on a teeny tiny farm in western Washington. And I know you're just about to wrap up the publication of a second year. I don't know if you have a title for that one.
Well, I have a working title, and so far that's the best one, and that is Ways to Amuse Your Goat, Year 2 on the Farmlet. Most people think that works well enough.
I think it's fun. I want to know how to amuse my goat, even though I don't have one.
Well, it boils down to everything we do here amuses them in one way or the other, so it seemed to be an overriding subject.
Well, I later on in our conversation, I really do want to talk with you about how you go about putting books together now. I know it's different than earlier in your career when you worked with traditional publishers, got contracts, wrote books. The books went into...
It's mind-boggling, the difference. It's like here is an unhappy writer and here is a happy writer. The difference. I was thinking about that this morning, that it's been 30 years almost since I had my first book published, and that was back in the mid-'80s when there was no internet or any of this, and it was strictly traditional publishing. You sent out query letters. I had a typewriter, and it was just luck, I think, perseverance, luck, whatever, that I ended up getting a book published so young. But it was a whole different world than it is now.
It was. However, there still are a number of people hoping to publish with traditional publishers, or, as I've been hearing, they are now called legacy publishers.
Mm-hmm. Legacy. Ooh,
makes us feel a little old.
Oh,
but
gosh.
I know from reading your books that it was more than luck that got them published, and they're published with significant publishers, Random House, HarperCollins, Scholastics. So I'd like to back up before we get to the present into, you said being published so young seemed to you very lucky. I'm sure it was, but as I said, talent was involved. What brought you to the field of publishing for young adults and elementary school kids?
I was a teacher. I was not a great teacher. I was a good teacher, but it didn't make me really happy. It was hard work. And what I longed to do, I realized as I was teaching sixth graders and seventh graders back in 1980, was to read stories to them and to write them. And so I did, and over the course of 10 years, I got out of teaching, which was my initial delight about it, because, like I said, it's very hard work. I'm a huge fan of teachers who can do it so vibrantly for years. So I ended up writing these books, and it was like my third or fourth one before I had an offer to publish it. That was from Houghton Mifflin. Then they published 5 more of my young adult novels between 85 and 92. I did lots of speaking, and it was a career. One year I made $24,000 or $25,000, and that was like huge. Felt like I was on my career path. But then I just didn't want to write children's books anymore. I was shifting. I was getting older. All of my family history was coming back into my face as I was raising children, and I no longer needed to create this adolescence for myself, which is what I did with my children's books.
And so
Am I going on and on?
No, it's all interesting. We have many reasons for writing, and it occurs to me, though, that writing books for young adults and for children is actually a way of teaching. It might not be the way you were trained to do it, and it might not be your expectation of how you would be a teacher, but I've read all your books, and I feel that they are very instructive to kids about the kinds of problems kids face growing up. They face in not understanding the adult world or having the adult world not understand them. So I think a lot of kids are probably very grateful that you created an adolescence by writing them.
Such cream on it. I mean, I have to say, for me, writing is a real selfish act. It is a complete processing of my own life and my own world. And if it benefits somebody else, oh man, that is just so fine and wonderful.
Well, let me say that
I'm not as altruistic as that.
It's okay. You don't have to be when you're writing, but when that work goes out into the world, it goes out into the world for a reason, and you allow it out, which is...
And that, Sheila, you're right on, because that is what it is about blogging that is so different for me. I mean, it's not only that I have complete control over it. I don't have to be submitting literally to publishers all the time, but there is this audience that I know cares. I mean, that there is a real community that gets sort of built there, and it's very satisfying. I can hardly, it's not like I'm writing in this place for years and years and years and then getting some feedback.
Right, right. But let's back up just a little bit more, because I know there was a period of years where you were transitioning from the writing of children's books. You mentioned it when you said your children were getting older, you were getting older, and you were processing family history that was coming back. And what was the genre that you chose to do that in?
Well, that's where you and I crossed paths, and that's why, I mean, right at the tail end of my children's book worldness, even though it was in my heart, it was the tail end. It wasn't at the tail end. Then you introduced me to personal essays, and it was like I had no idea that they could be so helpful personally. I truly had the idea, like you do when you're in high school, that is an assignment,
right? A burden.
And so I ended up writing essays instead, and it turned out to be so helpful to plumb these family stories and to let them echo in my own life with things that were happening as I was raising my own children. And they were adult things. I had tried to write adult books then after the adult novels, and they just were not good. All three of them, they just sit there still in their boxes out in the shed. I can't completely destroy them.
I don't think you should.
Yes, well, I look back at them, and I learned a lot with that writing. I don't write every day. I take notes every day toward my blogs. But back in those days, I really did write every day. It helped. It's made it where I have some skills, a skill set.
You certainly do, and I just want to interject that when you left the children's book publishing world and entered the personal essay world, that way of publishing was quite different. And as I remember, you submitted your essays to literary journals.
Oh, no pay whatsoever.
What a terrible influence I was on your life.
I know, we joked about that, but, I was going, well, Sheila, we're going to get paid for this, aren't we? And you were like, this is the poetry world, literary journal world.
You get copies. Yeah.
And so, but by that time, I didn't think of the writing as a career so much anymore.
So you were happy to get your copies.
I was happier doing not having somebody else say to me that this is the only thing that we'll publish of yours.
Mm-hmm.
And
so now that we have people a little bit caught up on the trajectory of your career, tell us how you got into blogging.
How I got into blogging? Well, let's see, blogging is maybe a couple years old now, I guess. I've been doing a blog for 2 years, and when I first thought of doing it, it seemed just very uppity, kind of audacious. What do I have to say? It seemed like bloggers were more like the people who were professors at universities and stuff like that. Since then, the speed of this is just, it's hard to even fathom. But right now, lots of people, I mean, it's a very common thing for people to have blogs. But I got into it because I have a friend I met online who I was reading his novels for him and giving him response to them. And he started a blog. And I thought, maybe I could do this too. But I didn't have a subject. I didn't want to write about writing because I don't have anything really to say about it. But I do about my lifestyle here on our little farm. And so it just started turning into these little narratives each week. And it's given this shape to my activity here. It's a real nice combination. Plus, my husband started drawing these little stick men. It's just hilarious. I mean, he's never drew these before, but he had drawn one on the table, in the kitchen table, in the morning when I put out the draft for the blog. It just kind of hung on there, and every week now he does them.
They're adorable. I enjoy seeing them in your blog, which, by the way, is called Farmlit, and it's farmlit.wordpress.com, living cheaply and richly on our teeny tiny farm in Western Washington. I know that you've also written a novella based on your experience living in Olalla, and you call it a bear tale, and I believe it's still available online.
Mm-hmm. It is free as a Smashwords ebook, and I also did the formatting for it to be a book on Create Space for the print version at $6, which is as cheap as I could make it.
You've come along from writing and having to bring your work to editors and agents to doing the whole thing yourself, which is really very interesting, and I want to talk more about it. But I do want to know where a bear tale fits in. Was it before the blog? Was it during the blog?
It was right at the beginning when I started the blog. In fact, it came first, and the blog was there initially to service the book. When I see other writers, peers of mine of the past, who continue to publish with traditional publishers, the author's website is just, this centerpiece. Wasn't really interested in too much of that, but I thought, I'll just I could make a blog or something about writing or about what I'm doing. First came the book, the novella, and the blog just right after it as far as a promotion goes. But it very quickly became the center.
You are listening to KPTZ 91.9 Port Townsend. In case you've just joined us, you're listening to In Conversation with Sheila Bender, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today, Sheila is talking with Olympic Peninsula writer Christi Killien, now Christi Glover, whose blog Farmlit about life growing vegetables and raising goats and chickens in Olalla, Washington, has garnered attention worldwide.
It seems to me the phrase once a writer, always a writer kind of has staying power with you.
It's the way it's a tool. Sometimes I think of it as a tool, like, a hockey player has skates. It's what I do to play the game. Whatever it is that I'm doing, I process it with the writing. And it's been that way for my whole life, really. And I can't really talk very articulately about it. I just know that it's my way. I don't want to structure my whole life around it. I want to use it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what you said. You said having the blog gives shape to the ongoing activities of your life. So it's a tool for...
That's right.
Right.
My daughter used to she said one time someone asked her, she was just started dating. I have 3 kids in their 20s, and one of them just started dating this guy a couple months ago, and she was introduced to his family, and they wanted to know what I did. And she's always said that I'm a writer, And so this time she reported to me, she said she's a farmer and she used to be a writer.
Well, she better read your blog more often so she knows you're still writing. But
she sees it that way, but actually that made me feel good.
Oh, good.
Because it was, I am a writer, I know that, and that's just, but to have something else, to have something you can actually write about, you got to have something, some subject. What is it you're going to write about?
Right. So I want to ask you, when you said you always were a writer, I think it's interesting to know the childhood history of writers, and you identify then that you were writing earlier than when you stopped teaching and started writing children's books. What were you doing? How did you identify as a writer?
I wrote whatever was I had to write in school. That was always a fun thing. I didn't dislike it at all. I started a mystery book when I was in 4th grade and took an old book from the pile. It was just a throwaway book, I guess, if there's such a thing, and pasted regular blank paper over all of it so I could write in it and make it an actual book. And it just was important to me somehow, that process of putting the description in a book or words.
So did you finish that mystery book? Did you write in every page that you had created?
No.
But
I'm sorry to say I didn't. I still have it.
Oh, good.
I think I turned it into a book about my boyfriends, a list that I always referred to or something.
Oh.
But
well, I think, though, that often when we look back to our childhood, we see the glimmers of who we were to become. For instance, my aunt, when she was moving years ago, came across some papers, and one of those papers was a birthday card that I had written to her when I think I was 10. It's a little booklet, all in pencil, with stick figures, and it's called How to Have a Happy Birthday. And it has pages and pages of what you're supposed to do to have a happy birthday. They all involve getting presents and eating cake and that kind of thing.
Sheila, that is such a good story. I mean, that is you today. You know?
I think that many of us should look back to our childhoods and see, what were our projects. And I was very grateful for my aunt keeping that, because I had forgotten about it, of course. But you kind of get a grounding in your identity. You might have changed the venue that you express yourself in some way, but who you were is often very apparent when you were a kid. And I think that one thing writers can do is look back to what were their fascinations and what did they do. I think it's kind of unusual to take a book and paste paper over it so you now have what would look like a very real book, only you can put your words in it. I love that idea.
And it's so magical the way things, if you watch over your entire years as you write, how they work back, they weave back into it. I mean, one of the things that I wanted so much to do when I was writing children's books was to illustrate them with little line drawings. My 3rd book is called Rusty Furtlanger Ladies' Man, and it's about a boy who's a cartoonist in the high school. He's small, and he ends up having to wrestle a girl on the wrestling team at school. And so these two things, this whole issue of the identity and being a boy and wrestling, etc., and the power that he has as a cartoonist in the school, on the school paper, play together. And I wanted so much to be able to draw those cartoons myself. And now here's my husband doing that. And it turned out to be one of the main things that kind of shut my heart down with the traditional publishers, because the jacket of that book was so disappointing. It was just a real sadness to see it. And then the paperback was even worse. And so I felt the lack of control in it all.
In what way were these covers disappointing?
Well, the first one just didn't, it just wasn't a good cover. At first, the character was stocky and did not look at all like the way I described Rusty, which many kids pointed out to me. And the monster, what are super guy in the background, just didn't look like a superhero should. And the paperback one had them, I mean, this guy is 14 years old, the main character, and the paperback had them as adults and looked quite sexual, like these two were going at each other. And I was like,
So
why?
I take it when you say many kids pointed out, this is when you maybe did author visits to schools?
Yes, speaking visits, and that was a big part of my income.
And what did you tell the kids when they pointed this out?
I told them that I didn't have any say in that thing, and they were shocked. That's a really interesting point, Sheila, because the kids they were under the impression, as everybody is really, that the author has something to do with the way the book looks when it's going through a traditional publisher, and it could be further from the truth.
Right.
And you find yourself feeling like it's misrepresented, but you feel like the kids are right to feel ripped off, because no matter what, if they like the jacket, they're not going to like the book. And if they want to like the book, they look at the jacket and go...
This is a wonderful segue then to why you're enjoying your blog, where you have control over the images, you have control over the content, and you have control over what it is you want to put out there into the world. So along the way, you've learned to be your own publisher, not only with a WordPress site that your blog goes into every week.
They're great. WordPress.com.
And you did this all yourself?
I did, and I am really a Fred Flintstone when it comes to computer stuff. I can say good things about WordPress and CreateSpace. There's a learning curve, and each year I'm facing it whether or not I want to try to hire somebody, but, I don't have a bunch of money for that. And so part of the beauty of this is that I can just go into those chat rooms and stuff, the forums, and do it. But I did it last year with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Goat on the Smashwords ebook.
So that's different than CreateSpace.
Well, that's correct, because CreateSpace is what you can use to make a print version.
Okay.
But to make an ebook, you have to go to either Kindle, which is Amazon, or Smashwords is the one I chose, because that's the way, through them I can make it free. You can't make books free with Amazon. You just can't. The littlest they insist on is 99 cents. And even though I love money, etc., I feel like since it's available, this content is available on the web for free, to charge for it as a book just doesn't match up for me. They do charge if you get a paperback through CreateSpace.
So is it on Kindle as well, or just Smashwords?
It is, but hardly anybody buys it there, because I think it's $2.99 or something.
But can people read a Smashwords ebook on a Kindle?
Yes. Smashwords you can read on any of the ebook e-readers or whatever, and your computer, whatever. That's why I went with it. And
right.
I think Kindle, of course, has got a bigger audience and distribution and stuff, but it's different now. I'm just not as wanting to get in the big leagues. I really like being in the small league.
Well, tell us a little bit about your small league. I know that you must hear from some readers of your blog and maybe of the books. Who are they?
Well, who are they? I've got friends in Tasmania, Australia now. I have them all over the United States, people in this area. Each blog frequently brings in neighbors and their characters. On the blog itself, I have a tab that's called Cast of Characters, which was requested by a reader because he was losing track of who they were. So it's something that our whole community here, I've got several neighbors who are quite involved in it. They like to read it, share it with their friends. I'm not sure what your question is. Oh, just who your audience is and how they respond to you and what you learn from them. And family, friends, and a good handful, I would say close to some hundreds, who are either followers or are involved. And I'm still kind of working through how to respond to comments and how to be, what my role is in this entity that has been created. You know what I mean?
I do. I do, because
it's got a life of its own.
Right. And also it's very interactive. If you're being able to expand your blog, say with that character tab because of a request. It's a very thriving back and forth kind of thing, which I don't think we get with books so much, because the only person we go back and forth with is the editor. And then it's out in the world, and there's nothing that can be done to change it unless they want to make a new edition, which would then take years. It must be very gratifying to be able to get a good idea from a reader and be able to quickly create an adjunct to the endeavor. I can see that you thrive with that. And I love the idea that writing for you is a tool for processing what's happening in your life, and that your lifestyle switch from city life, where you were teaching and writing, to rural life, where you're a farmer, as your daughter has identified you, has provided for you a substrate, something to really enjoy putting together in the written form. And I think that part of what we've talked about here is that when you were writing children's books, you thought creating an adolescence. Maybe you didn't know that then. Maybe it's something that you learned after writing so many of them.
I really didn't know it then. I would have been insulted.
But now you see it, and you know that the personal essay was your bridge from that writing to, let's call it, your adult writing, even though I believe that your children's book writing was quite adult, because it takes an adult really to create an adolescence.
Oh, I totally agree. I could just access those feelings of adolescence so easily. I mean, they were right there, wanting to be given life. Right.
And now the life that you're providing in your writing is coming from your environment. I know A Bear's Tale is about the appearance of a bear in a neighborhood like yours and the different reactions that the people have. It's a novella.
Yes.
It's a wonderful read. And your blog is a way, I love the fact that your neighbors are enjoying it, and it's a source for the whole community to have entertainment and take pride in what it's doing. And it's so different than, for instance, near where I live, there's Egg and I Road. And Egg and I is a very famous book in which the writers really upset the neighbors by making making them into characters that were less than appealing. And so you're moving in a whole different, very modern direction. And we have to wind up. I could talk to you for many more hours about your endeavor, but I was wondering if there's anything you would like people to know before we close our conversation.
Oh, just that I just don't. Oh, Sheila, I don't have anything knowledgeable to add to what you just said.
All right. Well, I'll do the closing then.
Thank you very much for calling.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just do a little closing, and then you can say goodbye. And in closing, I'd like to say, Christi, thank you so much for sharing your experience and for your honesty today about your feelings as a writer and your progress as a writer and person. It's been really fabulous to hear that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye, Christi. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
In Conversation is produced by Sheila Bender and edited by Charlie Fleischman. Production coordinator is Mike Schlexer.